I'm always looking for something new to do with chicken breast. And this recipe for Parmesan and crusted chicken breast is so amazingly delicious and easy to make, and it's a prep ahead meal, and you can make it with breadcrumbs or like I'm gonna do and make it low carb. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Today's recipe is super easy to make, and you can make it ahead of time and then store them in the freezer for a quick and easy meal during the week. All right, so let's get right to it. First thing we need to do is get our chicken breasts. These are boneless, skinless chicken breasts. They were about 8.5 to 9 ounces. I've trimmed them up so they're each about 8 ounces, and that's what you want for this recipe. And then we're going to cut them in half. So these 2 chicken breasts are gonna make a total of 4 servings, okay? Now, you can cut them in half any way you like, okay? I'm gonna give you a few options. But what I like to use is a little tool called the Close and Cut, and it makes it really easy to cut chicken breast in half. And I don't know about you, but if you've tried using your knife, sometimes what'll happen is you'll get a real thin spot, you know? So this just cuts right through the middle and makes both sides even. So I like to use it. All right, so let me go ahead and get the chicken on. And what you wanna do is put it right on the plate here. And I sort of bunch it up a little bit. I'm gonna have to use my hands, but that's okay. Bunch it up a little bit so it fits. Then we close the lid, and the lid closes tightly. Take a long knife and just run it right through. Just like that. Then when we're done, we have 2 chicken cutlets, okay, that are even, and that's wonderful. Now, of course, you can do this not using the close and cut, and I'm gonna show you 2 different ways. Well, I'm gonna show you one way, because I only have one more chicken breast, and then I'll also explain how you could do it if you wanted to cut them and pound them, okay? All right, so then if you don't have the fancy close and cut, which if you do a lot of chicken and you like to portion them out like this, recommend it. And I'll link to it below the video. But if not, you can use a knife. All right, so what you wanna do is lay your chicken out. You wanna eyeball about the middle here. And remember, this side is thinner than this side. There's a thick side and a thin side. So you kind of wanna lift up a little bit here so that you don't cut too much of that thin side. We'll see if I get this right. Then just run your knife. Now, I don't go all the way through because I like to peek. So then, and this is actually exactly how you would butterfly chicken if you wanted to stuff chicken as well. So now I peek, and now I can really make sure that I cut it correctly. So that's my way of doing it without the close and cut. And it works out pretty well, okay? It's gonna work perfectly for this recipe. They are even, and if I do say so myself, I did a pretty good job on that. I don't always. All right, there's one other way that you could do this and keep the cooking times the same. So let's pretend that this is not cut. You can cut straight down the middle here and then put your each half between 2 pieces of parchment and pound it thin. That would work fine too. If you wanted to bread and do whole chicken breasts just like this without cutting them at all, you can do that, but you will need to increase your time and decrease your temperature. But I'll get into that when we get into the temperatures and times for cooking this. All right, let me just get this kind of cleaned up here, and then we will get our breading done for the Parmesan and crusted chicken. All right, you also want to lightly, and I mean lightly, like maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon or so of salt on each side, top and bottom, just a little bit, okay? There's not a lot of salt in this recipe, but we have that Parmesan cheese, and that is going to be salty. So we wanna be careful that we don't over salt the chicken, but you do need a little bit to bring all the flavors out. All right, so that's it for the chicken right now. So I'm gonna move this over here, and we're gonna get our breading done. So the first thing we need to do is get our liquids, our kind of our wet batter, if you will. And it's 2 ingredients, 1/4 cup of heavy cream and 1 egg. So I'll just pour that right in there, and then we will whisk it up a little bit. can also use buttermilk if you prefer. You want something kind of thick so it really holds on to the chicken and so that the breadcrumbs and Parmesan, or in this case, because I'm making this keto version, low carb, the almond and Parmesan can really hold on to it. Pour that in. This is enough for 4 chicken breasts. 2 chicken breasts cut in half. Let me clarify that. All right, now for the almond part of this, I'm going to use whole almonds. That's my preference. You can use almond flour if you want. You can also use breadcrumbs. But I like to use whole almonds because when I blend them up in my blender, some are really fine, some are a little bit bigger, and that just adds to the crunch. So think about combining breadcrumbs and panko. You know, you've got the fine breadcrumb and then the coarser panko breadcrumb, and that gives a delicious coating. Well, that's the same thing that I get with these almonds if I blend them myself. So it's 1 cup of whole almonds, and then we'll blend them up to a little bit of a coarse texture. You could use a food processor for this as well. You could also use a bag and a mallet. That would work as well. And now I'm just going to use the pulse feature on the blender to pulse these up to the texture I want. You could use the pulse feature on your food processor as well. All right, so that's about 1.25 cups. So if you wanted to use breadcrumbs, use 1.25 cups. If you wanted to use breadcrumbs and panko, just split that in half, or you could use 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs and 1/2 cup of panko, whatever you want to do. But just make sure it's a total of 1.25 cups. All right, then we have our Parmesan cheese. The Parmesan cheese is finely grated, and I think it's very important in this recipe that you do that. And I use a block of Parmesan, I use 4 ounces, and I use a zester, okay, to get these really fine strands. It's 4 ounces, it ends up being about 2 cups, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and pour that in here. And our almond. And then just mix it up. I also want to add a little bit of seasoning to this dry mixture. So I'm going to add in 1/4 teaspoon of fine ground sea salt and 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. That's totally optional, but I do think it needs a little bit of seasoning. Now I don't season, just a tad bit more. If it's too salty, that's my fault. I put a little bit more than 1/4 teaspoon in. I don't season the wet batter. What I found is if I seasoned all 3, which I usually do, the meat, the wet batter, and the breadcrumbs, I found that it was just a tad bit too salty. So salt the chicken, that's important. You don't need to worry about salting or peppering the wet mixture at all. But then I do add a little bit to the dry mixture. So just kind of move this around in your breading tray or whatever you have. These are actually like for little toaster ovens. They're like little pans, and I couldn't find my breading trays that I use, so I'm using this instead. It looks like it's gonna work out just fine. Lots of cheese in this. I love that. So delicious. Okay. Now, it's pretty easy to bread these. I just usually either use my fingers or grab a fork, put them into the wet mixture, then pick them up, lay them on top here, and then make sure you get everything covered. And kind of pat it in a little bit. All right, that looks good. And then turn it over, make sure that you really bread this up nicely so that none of the chicken shows through. I also think that by grinding your own almonds, they're a little bit wetter, and I like the way the breading sticks. As I say that, I just, with my finger, took some of it off, so I'm gonna fix that. So I like the way the breading sticks with the kind of a little bit moisture of the almond, because almond flour is pretty dry, but when you grind them yourself, it's a little bit damp still, and I think that helps actually. So if you have whole almonds, do it that way. I think you'll be real happy. All right, so there we go. Super easy to do. As you can see, I still have a good amount of the cheese and almond mixture left over. I could definitely do another full chicken breast cut in half, maybe even two. So if you want to, you can cut the ingredients in half, but I don't usually like to do that when I'm breading something. I'd rather have more than not enough. But remember, we've put raw chicken in here. This cannot be saved. So you either need to get more chicken and use it up or discard it, okay? We can't save this for later. All right, so we're done with that, and now we're gonna get our air fryer preheated so that we can air fry them. All right, so for this recipe, I'm going to be using the appliance, the Ninja Speedy, which is kind of like the Ninja Foodi pressure cooker and air crisper. It has a lot of the same features, but it doesn't pressure cook, and it's square, as you can see. But we're using air fry, so no matter what air fryer you want to use, you can follow these same instructions. Now, the way that your air fryer heats, you'll know because you've used it a couple times. If it goes on the hot side, then maybe you want to back off your heat a little bit. If it doesn't cook as fast, then maybe you need to add some more time. So each air fryer is a little bit different in the way that it cooks, but essentially you can use the same temperatures and times as guidelines and check on your food, right? The only real difference is when you're using an air fry oven, they tend to be larger, and so there's more air loss. And I do notice that you do have to increase the temperature by about 50 degrees in the air fry oven. So you can use that as a guide. All right, we always want to preheat when we're doing anything breaded, and we preheat with the cooking surface inside. So in this air fryer, which this is an air fryer and it does other things, I'm not going to get into the whole details. I'll do another video to explain what it all does, but it's essentially, for this recipe, it's an air fryer. So you can use, like I said, any air fryer. It has an inner pot which stays in the whole time. And then also we have a rack, okay? This rack can be put up into the high position. It's actually, I think, a crisping plate, they call it, by extending the legs. But look at how close that is to the heating surface, okay, to the coils here. That is going to put our chicken just a little bit too close. So we're not going to extend them for this recipe. There are some times when you would do that, especially if you're going to do a dual layer meal. You could put it up. All right, so let's get the air fryer preheated. You want to go on your hottest setting, okay? And that will vary based on your air fryer. On the Ninja appliances that have broil is usually the hottest setting. So I am gonna turn this on. We're gonna go down to broil, and we're gonna hit start, stop, and we wanna preheat for 10 minutes. That was the default time. So now we will let everything heat up in there. So again, whatever air fryer you're using, just go on the hottest setting to preheat, okay? Now, let's finish prepping our chicken breast by adding some oil. Whether or not you're going to freeze them or not, I like to spritz them with oil now, okay? And the reason being is that the oil will actually help protect them from freezer burn. So if you're gonna make a whole bunch and then put them in the freezer to cook right from frozen, which I'll give you the instructions for, you wanna definitely spritz both sides with oil. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm using avocado oil. You could use whatever oil you like. You do not need a lot of it. Probably, like, I would say all told, it's gonna be a teaspoon of chicken breast, okay, if that. So we don't need a lot of it. All right, then flip them over and do the same thing on the other side. And the same thing would apply if you're using breadcrumbs. In fact, it's even more important, I think, when you're using breadcrumbs versus almonds, because almonds have that fat in them where breadcrumbs don't. So it's even more important if you're using breadcrumbs or panko with your Parmesan cheese for your breading. Definitely spritz a little bit of oil. It's going to give you the best results. Okay, once the air fryer has preheated, we can open up the lid. You want to kind of do this fairly quickly. I usually do give a little bit of a spritz here onto the plate. It's not necessary, but I usually just do, just as a little extra precaution. We don't want the chicken to stick. So go ahead and lay those down in a single layer. That's important. So how many you can cook at a time depends on the size of your air fryer. I can probably get 2 in the Speedy, 2 in the Ninja Foodi. Probably get all 4, maybe 3 in the XL grill. And all the instructions would be the same for all those appliances. A basket air fryer, you could probably just get one in, okay? But depends on the size. All right, so now we want to switch to air fry. So I'm gonna move the button up to the air fry, and we want to take the temperature down to 350, and the time is going to be 15 minutes. And hit start. All right, there we go. Now for the other two, what we can do is spread them out a little bit on our pan and plop them in the freezer. Let them freeze solid on the parchment. Once they're frozen solid, so leave them in overnight, you can put them in individual freezer bags, or you can put them together in a freezer bag. It's perfectly fine. Then you can just grab out what you want when you want to air fry. To air fry from frozen, it is a little bit different. You want to add about 5 minutes of time, and sometimes I'll even take my temperature down 25 degrees. But that's up to you. You can, start out at 350, see how it's progressing. If you see that the outside is getting too dark, but the inside of the chicken isn't cooked yet, take a temperature and see if it's still can't even get the probe in because it's still frozen. Drop your temperature down and increase your time, okay? But they're lovely to make ahead and then grab out for a quick air fryer dinner. All right, so halfway through, we want to check on things and give them a little bit of a flip. Now, depending on your air fryer, you may feel like you need to flip, you may feel like you don't need to flip. But what I find is with the Ninja air fryers, with the basket or the plate, the one side gets darker than the other. So I like to go ahead and carefully do this because you don't want to knock the breading off. So careful, which like I just did. So carefully. And if they're not lifting up, then you need to keep them on that same side. But this one will lift up. I just need to grab it. There we go. So see, we have a little bit more browning on this side than we do on the other side. This one, not as much, which is interesting. But anyway, by flipping them, we're just going to get even browning. Oh, one more thing. Let me go ahead and take a temperature. They're not going to be done quite yet, but... So it's about 159. So you can see, because we cut them in half through the middle, they're cooking very fast, okay? So I go the full 15 minutes, and the chicken is a little bit over the 165, but I find that gives the breading enough time to really crisp up, and it's delicious. And the chicken's not dry because it's encrusted, so it's just really magnificent. But as soon as it reaches 165, you can certainly pull it out of your air fryer if you like. And I told you I would talk about if you want to keep your chicken breast whole and not cut them in half through the middle. You can do that, but your time's going to be about 20 to 25 minutes, okay? So start checking your temperature at about 18 minutes and then go from there so you can get it up to the 165. All right, with just about 2.5 minutes left, I'm going to take another look here and just see how they're doing. And oh my gosh, they are gorgeous. And they are done. I'm not going to even go the rest of the time. And I'm going to fill you in on a little secret in just a minute. Let me get these out of here. Okay. Oh my gosh. Look at this. Oh. Oh my gosh. I just absolutely love this chicken. It is so easy to make. It is so delicious. You're going to love it too. Okay, so while these cool just a minute, and definitely if you're not going to serve them straight away, you want them to cool for a little bit, rest for a little bit, put them on a cooling rack so that you have airflow, so that you don't steam the bottoms. If I just set these on a plate and let them rest, or on my cutting board and let them rest, they would start to steam on the bottom and your crispiness kind of goes away. So definitely put them on a cooling rack. Okay, so now for my secret. I did not test this recipe in the Speedy. I decided last minute, right before we filmed the video, to use it because it was up on the counter. And I thought, well, it's an air fryer. I used the Ninja Foodi pressure cooker and air crisper to test the recipe, but an air fryer is an air fryer, right? And let's just see how it works out. Now, I used the basket in the Ninja Foodi pressure cooker and air crisper, and I did go the whole 15 minutes with that at the 350 degrees. But I pulled these off a little bit early because they just look so good, and the temperature was already up to like 177, okay? So definitely the chicken is definitely safe to eat. Probably the only time in my life that I would overcook chicken on purpose. But I just love the crispiness of the breading, and the chicken, like I said, is not dry. So the The other thing you can do though, okay, because if you are like, oh my gosh, absolutely not. I do not want my chicken to go not 1 degree above 165. Hey, I totally understand that. And what you can do is increase your temperature a little bit. So go up to 375, maybe even 400, and just cook for 10 minutes, okay? That hotter temperature is gonna get this breading, which is not even bread, but you know what I mean, get this crisped up and golden brown a little bit quicker. So definitely play around with times, temperatures, until you get the results that you absolutely love. All right, time to give it a taste. All right, perfect. So now, since it's overcooked a little bit, I'm gonna taste the driest end first. Listen to that crunch, oh my gosh, amazing. So traditionally, with a chicken, the little tail end is the driest because it's, of course, the thinnest. Oh my gosh, that is amazing. Wow. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you because I never would. It is a little bit dry, a little bit drier than I'd like, which is understandable since I overcooked it, right? So what I would do if I was gonna make it in the Ninja Speedy again is I would take my temperature up a little bit. So go up to 375 and cook for about 10 minutes or so. And it's gonna be delicious. The breading is amazing. All right, let's go ahead and cut straight down the middle. Oh my gosh, it looks so good. Now, I would not expect this middle piece to be that dry at all. Oh, I can tell you right now it's not. Mmm. Absolutely perfect. Oh my gosh, that's delicious. All right, guys, there you go. Super easy Parmesan encrusted chicken breast. You can do it traditionally with breadcrumbs and or panko, a combination with the shredded parm, or you can do it like I did with ground almonds and Parmesan. And either way, it's going to be amazing. Enjoy.